Give it just another minute and we'll get going. And we are live on YouTube as well. So that finally worked out. All right, we'll wait for one more person to join or one more minute, whichever comes first. I guess it's going to be one more minute. That has passed. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Losack. I'm the co-founder, executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. This is the Montgomery County Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. A couple of things. First of all, if you have any questions or concerns, we ask you to put them in the chat. We will get to them as we go through our program this evening. We are live on YouTube, and so if you missed this or would like to share this with folks later on, there will be a recording of it that we will share a link with down the road. Also, if you sign up, you'll be in our database. You'll get our newsletter if you don't already, and that'll include links with information from tonight as well as tonight's Renter Town Hall. So we look forward to that. Couple of things. Rent stabilization is still being considered by Montgomery County. The county council is looking at draft legislation now and will soon be announcing that the legislation is under formal consideration. Right now, there's discussions back and forth between the council and the county executive's office about the nature of that legislation, but it is definitely under serious consideration. I can tell you that the Renters Alliance, which was founded in 2010, has supported rent stabilization since before we were founded, and certainly when we were founded, as one of our policy goals for Montgomery County. And so we urge all of you to track this and see what's being discussed. We will have more discussion about rent stabilization and what it means for renters. As all of you probably know, we are seeing excessive rent increases across Montgomery County, many of them in the double digits. The rent increases, some of them being gouges, are really forcing people out of their homes. The Renters Alliance says this over and over again, but what we're seeing is the forced migration of working families and low-income families from our region. And so we're trying to figure out a way, and we think rent stabilization is the best way, to balance the legitimate interests of a landlord to maintain his or her profit margin and keep up with legitimate related expenses to managing their property, with a renter's right to have safe, stable, affordable, quality housing. We have never believed that housing can simply be looked at as a common commodity like beer or cigarettes or fancy pocketbooks and sneakers, but that housing is essential for the community's health, welfare, and prosperity. And so there has to be a balance. Just because somebody owns all of the housing doesn't mean that they can, extort from the community a profit that destabilizes the community and increases costs that we must all pay. So it is a very important policy discussion, and we urge you all to pay close attention to it. Obviously, it will affect all of us who rent. The other piece of legislation that is out there that we need to track, and that's called just cause eviction legislation. Just cause requires if it were enacted, requires a landlord to state a justifiable reason not to renew a lease when a lease is to be renewed. Right now, with just 60 days notice, a landlord could say to a tenant, no matter how long they've been there, no matter how good a tenant they've been, that they're not going to renew the lease. When the lease is not renewed, when the tenant stays 1 day longer than the lease allows, that tenant is what's known as tenant holding over. That is, you've held over beyond the term of the lease. The landlord can then file to evict you for tenant holding over, and the landlord does not have to provide any justification for taking that action. All they have to do is provide the judge with a notice that shows that they've given 60 days notice to the tenant. If they've done that, the landlord can take possession of the apartment after the judgment against the tenant, even if you know that the reason is because of something nefarious like racial discrimination, or you've tried to form a tenants association, or you've complained about the conditions in the building and demanded promised or required services. Because the landlord is not required to state the reason for not renewing the lease, it's very easy to hide all of those wrongful motivations. So one of our board members, Delegate Janelle Wilkins, has again proposed in the state legislature, because eviction law is state law, to allow municipalities like Montgomery County to pass just cause eviction protection in any form that they choose, or not to pass it at all. But right now, a local municipality cannot pass just cause eviction law without the state providing state legal authority to do so. So that bill is going to be heard in Annapolis on February 24th. For the first time in the state's history, and certainly Montgomery County's history, the county council has supported it unanimously. The county executive supports it. The vast majority of our county delegation has supported it. Many municipalities around the state of Maryland have supported it, but it has not gotten out of the housing committee, which has been chaired by Delegate Kumar Barve, who opposes it. And so the way the sausage factory works in Annapolis is that if it doesn't get out of the committee, it is very difficult for the rest of the delegates around the state and for the Senate to consider it and pass it. So we ask you again to contact your state delegates to pay attention to this. We will be informing everybody about what we know. We will also be organizing people to testify, and we will do our darndest to support this legislation. It is very close, but we still have some people with very old-fashioned thinking about what housing is and whether a landlord should treat a tenant as a permanent member of the community or just some guest in their living room that they don't want there anymore. So just keep those things in mind. We're also working closely with the county council, the county executive, and with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs and Health and Human Services to support and advance increasing services for renters. And we'll discuss some of those services tonight. So I am delighted, as always, to have some special guests with us. But first, let me introduce my staff. Pat Beckham is here, and Malek Demir. They will be monitoring the chat to make sure that your questions and concerns are addressed. And we have two special guests tonight. First, we will go to Carmen Castro Conroy, who's with the Housing Initiative Partnership, who's going to give us an overview of the Maryland Tax Credit Program. And later on, we'll be welcoming Tom Howley of the Code Enforcement Department for Montgomery County to discuss issues with code and to answer your questions and give us an overview from the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. So let me turn it to my good friend and partner and colleague in crime, Carmen Castro Conroy. Welcome, Carmen.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you everyone for inviting me to be at this meeting and share some of the information that I have for you tonight. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start sharing the screen and tell you who we are and what we do, and then go in detail about the Renters Tax Credit Program. So HIP Housing Initiative Partnership is housing nonprofit developer and housing counseling agency. We serve Montgomery County and Prince George County, both renters and tenants. And our goal is to equip our clients with the information they need to reach their housing and financial goals. We offer all of our counseling services free of charge. We have an office in Germantown at the Up County Regional Service Center, and another office in Gaithersburg, and our main office in Hyattsville. We are a comprehensive HUD-approved housing counseling agency. So as part of our program, we provide rental counseling, pre-purchase counseling, post-purchase, and foreclosure counseling. As part of our rental counseling program, we can help clients find affordable rental housing, which is very challenging in Montgomery County, we all know. We can also help our clients look into their budgets, finances, see what they can afford, review their credit. We talk about fair housing rights and provide guidance regarding landlord-tenant disputes. During the COVID pandemic, one of our services under rental counseling has been to provide assistance with the COVID relief rental application and any other type of financial assistance to prevent evictions. We also have home buyer education. We currently offer our 8-hour home buyer class virtually via Zoom 1 Saturday a month. We have an upcoming class on Saturday, February 25th. And all of this information will be available on our website, and I'll share that with you as well. We also provide tenant outreach by conducting virtual sessions in English and Spanish on Tuesdays. We also have a tenant outreach specialist in court Wednesdays and Fridays, and we do tenant outreach as well, just in general in the community. And we have a couple other programs, one called Home Sharing, where we try to match homeowners with home seekers in a way that's safe and affordable. We're always recruiting both home seekers and homeowners. Rents are market rent for either a bedroom, chair, or basement or ADU, but you get the support of our staff in helping you with the match. And we also have the FEC Center in Gaithersburg, serving Gaithersburg residents with free one-on-one financial counseling. So you can also contact us about that if you're trying to reduce your debt, increase your savings, or improve your credit. So I just gave you a brief overview of all of our services in Montgomery County, and our website is hiphomes.org. And I'm also sharing the address for the Germantown office on our main number, 301-916-5946. And the Gaithersburg office as well on the address. So you're always welcome to give us a call, schedule a session with a counselor, or if you just have a question, you can email me directly or reach any of our staff. So with this introduction about HIP, now I'm just going to move into the Renter's Tax Credit Program. Please let me know if you're able to see the screen. Okay, so the Maryland Renter's Tax Credit Program, it's administered by the Department of Assessments and Taxation. It's not a new program. It's been in existence since 1984. It's just that not a lot of people know about it, because we can assume that there's not much outreach that's done for this program. So it's on us, community organizations, to help residents know what's available through this tax credit. It's usually, it opens in the month of February. And I just heard today that the applications will be available February 24th, but you can also apply online. And if you're interested, you can go directly to this website, dat.maryland.gov, or you can Google Maryland Renter's Tax Credit, and I'll tell you what it is and who can qualify for this credit. So you can visit this website and review the information I'm going to share, but it's open to two groups. Tenants of age 60 or over, or 100% disabled, and the income for that group can go up to $73,000. So you have to basically be below income, which is if the case can go up to $73,000, and your rent more than the specific rent that they have for the chart. So if you meet the income criteria with the rent that you pay every month, you basically meet the basic criteria to apply for this program. And I'm also going to show you the application. So just trying to cover as much information as I can. Many renters over the age of 60 do qualify for this credit. And in order to qualify, you do have to complete the form, submit the application with a copy of your lease from the previous year. So this is based on calendar year. So this year would be your rent in 2022 with income taxes from 2022. So we tell our clients to please wait until you filed your income taxes to give us a call and let us know exactly what was your household income in the previous year. And including the application, you will have to submit a copy of your lease that shows how much was your rent every month in the year of 2022. So that's the chart for people age 60 or older or 100% disabled. But if you're under the age of 60 with dependents under the age of 18, you can also qualify. So this is a chart for people 60 years of age or under with dependents. Now, the income limit is much lower than the criteria that we just reviewed for those age 60 or older, but we still have clients who may meet the criteria based on the number of dependents. And all this information you can review on the state website or contact our office if you need assistance. If you have your taxes and a copy of your lease, you can go into the website and submit an application online. So I'm going to show you exactly where that goes. Online filing, sorry, this is strongly encouraged. So you just click on this section. And I'm not going to go and review the homeowners property tax credit, but there is a program for homeowners as well. And you go down and you find all the information about the renter's tax credit application. So the deadline is October 1st. You have plenty of time. It takes about 90 days for the state to complete review and issue the credit. And like you say here, like you see here, they if approved, you get a direct check payment of up to $1,000 once a year. So if you click this section, you're going to see all the information to apply online and submit the supporting documentation, which again will be income taxes from the previous year, 2022, and a copy of your lease that shows your rent payments for 2022 as well. So if you're able to upload documents and submit online applications, you're welcome to do that yourself through this portal. But I'm going to show you how the application looks like if you want to wait until February 24th, when the applications will be on this website. It's a very simple application, just 2 pages, just your contact information. This is the application I'm showing you. It's gonna ask you to provide detailed information about your rental payments. This is last year's application because this year's application is not available yet. But it's gonna say 2022, the total rent paid. If you get rental subsidies and are over the age of 60, you're eligible, and you will just include the rental portion that you're responsible for. You have to include all household members that live with you. So that's the first page. And the second page is basically what's reported on your income taxes for applicant, spouse, and other household members. It does need to be signed and dated. And once you print this application, you attach a copy of your lease, your income taxes, and mail it directly to the address for the Department of Assessments and Taxation in Baltimore. And like I said earlier, it takes about 90 days for the review of the application to be completed. if you want to reach out to the state and ask for the status of your application, or if you have questions before submitting your application, they're open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And there's a toll-free number to call, 1-800-944-7403. We have created a flyer. You may have seen this at events or public libraries or other community places where we're trying to promote the state tax credit, especially if you're over 60 or disabled, or if you have dependents under the age of 18. And it also has our contact information to apply. And I also have, let's see. Oh, here. If you're interested in just a summary of what the Renter's Tax Credit Program is all about, I can share this page with you, and this is good for presentations if you want to talk about this program or know people that may apply, people that you know. This is just a summary of who is eligible. Like I said, there are two groups or two charts, one for age 60 and over, and the other one for age 6 and under 60 with dependents under the age of 18. Filing deadline October 1st. And how to obtain an application and the phone number for the state Department of Assessments and Taxation. I have some clients that tell me that they don't do this because they file their income taxes and their tax preparer knows every credit that there is available to them, and they just trust their tax preparer in filing their renter's tax credit application. And one way to know is I ask them, have you provided a copy of your lease? And if they say no, I say, no, then I don't think you have submitted an application to the state, because it would be required for you to sign additional forms and submit a copy of your lease. So that's one way of knowing. And if you don't file taxes because you're not required to, like if your only source of income is Social Security, just the verification of the income from Social Security will be sufficient. Like the 1099 or W-2, if you're not required to file taxes. I think that's all I have. Thank you, Matt.
That's terrific, Carmen. I want to see if we can repeat something that you just mentioned. So if you don't pay taxes, you don't have to file because your income is so low. Can you still get $1,000 back from the state?
Yes. And the reasoning behind is that you're paying property taxes indirectly when you pay your rent. So that's the reason.
Well, for years, people said that renters didn't pay taxes. And we know that's not true, because the landlord sure isn't separating rent from the taxes that he or she has to pay. So that's really good to know. But that's $1,000 in your pocket if you're if you're eligible, and it's sitting there. So we want to make sure that renters who qualify or are eligible for the funds can get it. There were some other questions out there, Pat and Malek. Did you spot them?
So is the tax credit available for Section 8 housing voucher recipients?
Yes, if you're over 60 and it's only based on the portion of your rent and your income.
So if you're receiving $1,000 on a $1,500 a month rent, and you receive $1,000 voucher, how does that work in terms of your eligibility?
Sure. So your portion of your rent monthly is $500. So if you submit an application, the state will see what's your household annual income and your portion of the rent monthly. So they have a formula to determine if you're eligible. I can show you when we screen clients before we submit any applications. I will have to share the screen again and take you back to the
so not everybody gets $1,000. You could get less than that.
Right. So it's going to be if you look at this chart, column A and column B. So column A is for income, household income, annual income, and column B is the rent, your portion of the rent. So if your portion of the rent, let's say, is less than 423, and your income is less than 20,000, then you're not going to be eligible.
Right. So if you're on a voucher and you're making 39,000 and your portion is 400, you would not be eligible.
Exactly.
Okay. But what about, I know there's other charts in here. Maybe you can show us if you have 2 or 3 children in your household is right. There we are.
For under 60, like it says here, living with you and did not receive federal or state housing subsidies.
Got it.
So unfortunately, no one will be considered for this credit if receiving housing subsidies.
Got it.
And so is this across Maryland or just
Yes.
Montgomery County? It's across Maryland. Okay.
State of Maryland.
This is a state program, but it's not run out of the comptroller's office. It's run out of Department of Housing. Is that right?
Department of Assessments and Taxation.
Oh, it is assessments and taxation. Okay. What else, folks?
So, and we're being asked if if there's a retrofit. So if somebody already filed their 2021 taxes without knowing about this, right? Okay.
No, unfortunately, not for the renter's tax credit, only for the homeowner's tax credit for those aged 70 or older. They can go back 3 years.
Well, that's
for
not
the-
fair. Carmen,
Right?
you gotta
Again.
fix that, Carmen. We're looking to you to fix that. But seriously, that really is not fair. That's a glitch. And it goes to show that, and maybe things will change with the new governor, but much of housing policy in the state and the support that people have gotten from the Department of Housing and Community Development, that's the state department, is geared towards homeowners and not towards renters, who represent nearly 40% of the state's residents nowadays. So that's a glitch that needs fixing. I wonder who we would go to for that. Is that a Loring Charkoudian thing?
We can advocate on behalf of that particular glitch. There have been reasonable changes made in the last few years to expand this program and create support and outreach and like notify, for instance, recipients, both on the renters component and the homeowners component. And I've seen more interest in promoting and making sure that at least those who are eligible apply. Which we're doing what we can, so we don't want anyone not to get the $1,000 that they are available to or eligible to. And
Right.
just to share some information, last year the state received about 9,500 applications. About 6,600 were approved, and total 3 million issue in credits. We can do much better. We can do much better.
Yeah, but I think that there's a policy inconsistency there. While I support homeowners getting their fair share, I think the neediest group are going to be the tenants. And if access is limited to 1 year on the deadline and homeowners can retroactively fit theirs back 3 years, that seems to be out of line. But I'm just kidding about you fixing it, Carmen. But if you have any idea of anybody we can go to, that is something I think we should look at legislatively. And we do have a new administration in Annapolis, so maybe there'll be some more innovative thinking. What else?
Carmen, can I ask, is the tax credit available for Section 8 housing voucher recipients also?
If the applicant is age 60 or older, it's possible. They have to meet all the other criteria,
Okay,
but not for households age 60 or under 60.
thank you.
And yes, it would seem to be the eligibility for, as you can see in the chart, low income, it depends on how you define it, but clearly, 73,000 seems to be the maximum amount anyone could earn. And it goes all the way down to low figures. And on the persons in households who are, that's for people over 60, and for people under 60, it's only 49,200. So if you're living in Montgomery County and paying rent with 49,200, you're probably what we would consider at least housing burdened and low income. But if you're 20 years old, you might be footloose and fancy free with that kind of money. Who knows? Okay. Anything else in the chat or any other questions or concern for Ms. Castro Conroy?
I think Carmen has addressed most of them.
Yeah,
Okay. And again, Carmen, when is the open date for the application?
February 24th for the printed application. But again, we're happy to schedule appointments if anybody needs assistance in submitting a package, but we will require a copy of the documentation of income from the previous year or their income taxes. So after they file, so this is a good time to spread the word because everybody's like working on their income taxes, but the deadline is not until October 1st. So if you're gonna call us to see if you qualify, make sure that you have a copy of your lease that covers what you paid in rent from January through December of 2022 and your income taxes. And
For
we'll be
those
happy
people who
to.
don't have leases, are there any other documents that could suffice?
Proof of rental payments or a statement from the landlord.
Okay. So
That's
there are other ways around this for those who have more casual landlord-tenant relationships. Good to know.
Yes.
And as far as I know, month to month tenancy doesn't make any difference. If you're on month to month, you're still paying a monthly amount of rent, and hopefully your rent should not change month to month, except once every 12 months. So your rent is whatever your rent is over a 12-month period. So whether you're month to month or an annual lease or a 2-year lease, your average year's rent should be the same.
And quickly, I forgot to mention that in order to qualify, you have to show that you have lived in the state of Maryland for at least 6 months and pay rent for at least 6 months.
This is a more complicated one from our good friend Michelle Higgs, who knows how to ask a complicated question. So I'm going to ask it for her. Does a 65-year-old with an HOC voucher that reduces rent to $1,200 and an income of $50,000 exclude them from receiving the renter's tax credit? I guess we have to go to the chart.
Yes.
This sounds like an SAT question. Go ahead, Carmen.
The chart only shows increments. So right now I'm looking at the 49,000 and 53,000. So we're very close, and rents of 1,300 and 1,400. So I would say the answer is maybe. It's worth looking at. The additional detailed information that we can definitely make sure what's that the portion of the rent would not exceed the criteria and the exact income.
I'm going to go to the Q&A, even though we asked you all to put your questions in the chat, so forgive us for not seeing it right away. This is a state program, and so it applies the same to everyone in the state of Maryland, whether you're in Prince George's or Baltimore or Montgomery County. That's the first one. For roommates, do they split the credit or the applicant gets it? My guess is It's whoever's on the lease. Carmen?
Roommates, it's household income. So if they're both on the lease and they're two separate households for two applicants, it's income combined.
If they're both on the lease,
Yes.
right?
Now,
So,
I also didn't mention that there are let's say someone renting a room. We had that question before. If someone is renting a room, they may be eligible if they meet all the criteria. And as long as they're renting a room from a homeowner, they can't rent a room from another
a
tenant.
renter.
Right.
So they can't sublease a portion of a unit from a renter. Although I
That's
don't know why not.
Well,
Except that the renter is not paying,
right.
it's a double pay into the tax because they're not
Mhm.
really the landlord per se. Got it.
Yeah. Carmen,
okay.
what if you're not required to file taxes?
Some people that their income is only Social Security are not required by law, but we always encourage everyone to file taxes. Even
Okay.
with Social Security income is in your best interest. It protects you from identity theft. That's one of the reasons.
Okay, thank you.
If the rationale is that you pay property taxes when you pay the rent, why is there a limit to income of the renters?
That's a good question. It doesn't cover definitely doesn't cover everyone.
Yeah, I think this is one of those ones where there was a recognition, a slight recognition, that renters are actual tax-paying residents and deserve to be recognized as such. We don't know if how much of the renter's rent is going to the property tax that the landlord pays. I can assume that I don't know any landlord who's taking overhead expenses out of their own pocket and separate from rent. So it would seem to me that I also don't know, maybe Carmen, you can answer this. Does the homeowner's tax credit, is that parallel to what renters get, or do they get a whole different level of return?
To begin with, it's available to those whose incomes are below 60,000, and it's going to depend on their portion of their tax limit based on their income. So similarly to this chart, there's going to be another chart. So it's not just for everyone making less than 60,000, but depending on how much they pay in property taxes, if they exceed the limit, that difference will be reimbursed. So it depends basically on the home value of the property they live in, or the assessment.
So then interesting that a policy argument could be made that if the landlord is charging X amount of rent and paying X amount in property tax. By the way, the landlords file for I guess they couldn't file for the low income tax credit.
It's only principal residence.
Principal residence.
Only if the property is your principal residence, you're eligible to file if you meet all the other criteria.
So the landlord's not getting any money back. Only homeowners who meet a certain eligibility get a certain percentage of their taxes back. And I guess someone has determined that renters should get a little tiny piece if you're very low income. So there's room to argue that the tenant should get more back, but right now it's pretty much sounds somewhat arbitrary to me. $1,000.
And again, a lot of homeowners don't know about the existence of the homeowners tax credit program, and they get confused when they bring their 1099 on the interest of their mortgage to the tax preparer, and I think that's that's what it is. So we ask the same questions. No, this is separate. This goes directly to the state. It's not based on the interest of your mortgage, but it's on the property taxes that is paid through your mortgage. So it's just different set of scenarios.
Do you know, Carmen, if where these funds come from? Are they put there every year? Is there a fund that rises and falls? Is it something that the legislature determines each year? Who creates the fund? And what happens if the fund is not completely used? Do you know that?
No, I'm assuming that it's directly related to the property taxes that are paid.
Mm-hmm. So
It's just a portion, and they must know ahead of time, based on calculations from previous years, what to expect. We just want the numbers to increase because there's a good number of people that don't know about this and are not submitting their applications when they are eligible.
So presumably then, the money that's generated from these taxes, that first of all, anybody who's eligible will get the reimbursement. Is that right? There's no, because one
Right.
would assume that it's the year's taxes, so the revenues came in and a portion of them go out. And if they don't go out, then they go to the general revenue, I imagine.
That's what I'm assuming as well.
Right. So another thing we might consider is whether they could put the unused portion that should have been claimed into some good purpose, like maybe supporting yours and our organization's outreach. Always looking for funding. All right. Is there another question or concern, folks?
No,
Good. I'm just gonna stop
Oh.
sharing.
All right, then seeing none, I want to thank Carmen Castro Conroy from the Housing Initiative Partnership for bringing us this important information. I hope everyone who's eligible out there takes advantage. And if you're not eligible, but you understand the program, please share it with your friends and neighbors and anybody you work with who could qualify for it. Can we get Carmen's contact information up again?
Yes.
So that people
Here, all of
can,
the information
yeah.
right now.
and Carmen, did you say that you're going to have an information session on this down the road? Another, perhaps?
Sure. We may include it with our info session for tenants in the month of March and April.
Okay, and we'll be sure to promote that to all of you so that you can sign on to that program if you'd like to get more information, more specific information about this program. Again, it opens on the 24th of February and closes, you said, on October 1st for renters. So with that, Carmen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to our next guest. For those of you who live in this county, the Montgomery County has two enforcement departments that deal with rental housing. One is the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, and the other is the Code Enforcement Department. And with us is Tom Howley from Code Enforcement. Tom, welcome, and thanks for the information.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everyone. In the interest of time, I am one of 4 program managers in the code enforcement section of DHCA. I was just involved in 8 interviews yesterday. We were looking for some good candidates, and I think we're going to have to pass on one good one because they were very strong candidates. We're going to be fully staffed in short order, I believe, 35 inspectors. Inspections happen every day, single family, multifamily. What we ask tenants to know about routine inspections is to, first of all, be prepared. You will be informed in advance, at least 72 hours in advance of an inspection. Please be prepared. When we arrive, if you happen to be there we're looking for health and safety concerns are our primary targets. Smoke alarms, CO detectors, plumbing leaks. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. If you are present, our inspectors typically will ask you if you have concerns. That is the time to ask them about physical conditions in your apartment, in your dwelling that you have concerns with. Matt asked me to make sure that there was to discuss the distinction between code enforcement and OLTA, our Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. I would say again that the code enforcement group is involved with physical conditions in your rental dwelling. OLTA, landlord and tenant, is involved with your lease, the lease terms, rental increases, withheld security deposits when you finally leave your dwelling. We work very closely together, OLTA and the code enforcement group, and there are many times when we have shared cases in dwellings. I can't say enough about them. They're very responsive. They know their tasks. And again, we do share information to the benefit of the tenants. How and when to file complaints was requested to be discussed by Matt. We always ask that you, if you have a concern with something going on in your rental dwelling, to speak with the manager or the landlord first. Please give them an opportunity to make good on what's needed to be corrected. If they fail to do so, then you can contact 311. They're very efficient in getting that information over to us in code enforcement. A case is created, an inspector is assigned, and a scheduled inspection will be created.
So Tom,
Again-
if I may go
Sure.
over what you described, which we have to, it took me years to get it, having heard it over and over again, and I do this for a living, but if you're a renter, you might be hearing this for the first time or not enough times. There are annual inspections that take place. Every apartment building, and Tom, please correct me when I'm wrong. Every building is inspected at least once every 3 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they're on a schedule. Some buildings will be inspected, I guess, 10%, 25%, 50%, 100%.
Yes, depending on the past inspections, there's a severity score that I haven't, that our multifamily team will calculate based on the number of violations and the severity of the violations that are discovered. The properties will be inspected more frequently for a higher score, less frequently if they're flying right.
Right. Most properties, every property, let me say, always has a code violation, but there are differences in code violations. If there's a light bulb that needs fixing, it's one thing, but if there's a serious violation that could endanger somebody's life or called a life safety violation, that's a more serious issue. And the code department will look at apartment communities at what the volume of citations, the severity of the citations, and how soon and responsive the property management or landlord is in fixing that situation. The county executive Elrich passed legislation with our help, I should point out, in 2016, the Renter Protection Act, and part of that act created a system called the Troubled Properties List that Mr. Howley is referring to for those few properties, but nevertheless significant, that have substantial problems that don't get fixed fast enough, and some of them life safety. And I believe the code department is working to get that done. And unfortunately, some of that was derailed a little bit because of COVID, where it became difficult for code inspectors to get in. But I know that there are some questions about process again. So on a routine basis, and assuming that you're not on the troubled properties list and getting 100% inspection as often as required, but at least once a year, a communication goes out to all the tenants in the building saying we're coming at least 72 hours in advance, maybe more. And what should tenants do in response to that notification?
Again, be prepared. Know that on that date, at that time, we typically start at 10 in the morning. We don't start at the crack of dawn. We try to get in and get out, but we don't start before 10 in the morning.
Right.
If there's a dog or an animal that needs to be addressed, please keep that in mind. Our inspectors are there to do their task and get out and move along. So
It's also an opportunity for the tenant, knowing that the inspector is coming. If you've got an issue in your apartment, or there's an issue in the apartment community that you feel that the property management has not addressed in a responsible way or a prompt way, again, echoing what Mr. Howley just said about making sure you're giving them an opportunity to fix a problem before you complain about it to code. But this is an opportunity, knowing that code is coming, to address the code inspector and say, hey, there's a problem in the laundry room, there's a problem with the garbage chute, there's a problem with vermin in the hallways, or there's a problem in my apartment maintenance wise that the property management or landlord has not addressed after I have requested they do so repeatedly. And by the way, we always urge you to make those requests in writing.
Thank you, Matt. If I may,
yeah.
just for a second, I
Please.
always tell folks, nobody knows your community, your building, your dwelling like you do. You know, we're there on a visit that day. We don't know what happens late at night, what's going on down at in the laundry area that shouldn't be going on at that. We will discuss that with the property managers. Please, if you see something, say something, if I may.
Absolutely, thank you. And also, this comes up quite a bit, Tom, that the inspectors usually are going around with property staff, but can they, the tenant can also say, I only want the inspector in my house. Is that right?
I generally, we like to have somebody from management there. I've not heard that very often, Matt. I think
The reason is that if there are complaints and they're afraid of retaliation,
Yeah.
that they want to make a complaint confidentially with the inspector. By the way, I do think that the inspector and the property manager can be forbidden from entering the apartment if the tenant is home. It may be against the lease. They may say, hey, look, you got to let us in at some point. We'll take you to court if you don't. But it's your private property and nobody can push their way in through the front door. And likewise, I think the tenant could say, well, the inspector can come in, but the property manager cannot.
That's, yeah, I mean, again, it doesn't happen often. And I understand a tenant's hesitance to bring some concern up in front of the property manager, fearing retaliation. Sadly, I'm sure that happens from time to time, but yeah, I mean, if you know, pull the inspector aside. Hey, can I talk to you out in the hall for a moment? You know, can you come back in a moment when you're finished with this hallway? Yeah, we can make that arrangement, Matt.
And the other thing is I imagine, Tom, since you're giving them notice days in advance, that they can call code and say, hey, look,
Absolutely.
you guys are coming. When you get to my apartment, you know, these things are going on, so please stop by. Also, if it's only a 10% inspection or a 50% inspection, they may not be coming. It's a random inspection. They may not be coming to your apartment, and you can alert them to come to your apartment because you've got an issue.
Exactly right. I just had a visitor today asking that question. He, you know, it's a 25% inspection. I explained that to him. He was very happy to hear that.
Mhm.
Yep.
The other thing, Tom, is that we know that there's an inspection regime of, you know, once every 3 years or whatever, and of course the troubled properties list. But you're open for business every day.
Yes, we respond to complaints again. Please give the property manager, the landlord, the owner an opportunity to make the repairs. If they fail to do so, contact us via 311. A case will be set up, an inspector will be assigned, and we'll be out there. Complaints anytime.
Good to know. And again, the difference between code and landlord tenant is that code handles maintenance, broken appliances, mold and vermin. Is there anything I'm missing in that, Tom?
Physical conditions, yes. I mean, what you've said in physical conditions within the unit.
Right. Whereas the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs will do with lease disputes and renters' rights in general. So if you're some service that you're promised in your lease that you're not getting, that's a landlord tenant complaint. If it's your rights, like the right to form a tenants association, or your right to see your utility bills, or some other right that you have, that is a landlord tenant complaint. But with landlord tenant or code, we are in agreement with the department that please give your property manager or landlord the opportunity to understand the problem and fix it first. The other thing is that the Renters Alliance and Housing Initiative Partnership, we're here to give you advice on if you're not sure when. So you think you've got a problem, we've been in this business for a while, and we can guide you about what the laws are. We're not lawyers, but we play them on TV, and we can tell you about what a good strategy might be for resolving the issue. We'll make sure that you've followed the appropriate steps. And then, of course, we can also guide you to the county's resources and enforcement mechanisms and make sure that you know how to do that. So we're here to help as well. And with any luck, we'll be able to relieve code and landlord tenant of some of the complaints because some of them don't require enforcement. Questions and concerns in the chat?
So for unsanitary trash conditions, dumpsters, is that a code enforcement issue?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
thank you.
We would ask the management to jump on that immediately.
Yeah,
Just looking at these questions now. What can the tenant do if the landlord says it's a violation that you are not allowing them in? That's a lease term. There's something in the lease that speaks to the landlord's right to entry. Ms. Langley.
I can address that, Tom.
Thank you.
As the law says, first of all, no landlord, unless it's an emergency, no landlord or property manager can enter your apartment without at least 24 hours notice, unless it's an emergency. If you have a broken pipe and there's a flood taking place, it's an emergency. If there's obviously, if there's a fire or some other issue going on and it's an emergency. What's the standard? Think of Judge Judy. If Judge Judy thought it was an emergency, it's an emergency, okay? That's the standard when they can come into your home quickly to address an emergency. If you think that it wasn't an emergency and the landlord is taking your privacy for granted, you should tell them, knock it off, and if they won't or they are abusive to you, you need to file a complaint with the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. Likewise, any reasonable landlord should be able to respond to you if you say, look, I'd like to be in the apartment when you come in. And, you should have a good reason for that. It shouldn't be, willy-nilly, but if you say, look, I want to be there when you come in, and the Tuesday you say you're coming is not convenient for me, can you come on Thursday or can you come on the weekend? And I think you should be able to generally work that out. Sometimes that's not possible. If the landlord is doing a building-wide extermination, for example, they may not be able to accommodate an individual complaint or an individual request for coming in at a different time because they've contracted with an extermination company to do the whole building in 2 or 3 days. But they should also be giving you ample warning, ample advance warning that they're coming during that time. So if they don't, and we've seen, for example, that on a holiday weekend, the landlord said the exterminator is coming on Monday and Sunday was Christmas. That wasn't fair. So, we've been able to work out those kinds of communications and your rights. But you should be able to negotiate when somebody comes into your house. And as always, it is your private space. So unless the police are coming in, or unless there's an emergency or a fireman coming in an emergency situation, no one has the right to push through your front door if you do not want them to come in. If it's in the lease and they've given you 24 hours notice, and there's no reason for you not letting them in that any Judge Judy would say, okay, that was a good reason, then you could be in violation of your lease. And then the landlord could file against you in court to evict you for not abiding by the lease terms and letting them in after they gave you legitimate notice. So that's how that would work. It is very unusual to see that, but we have seen claims where tenants have refused repeatedly to allow a legitimate request by the landlord to enter and inspect the apartment. And eventually that's going to be trouble if you don't have a good reason for that. What else, folks?
Tom, can you speak to the time frame? Certain things can be fixed in an apartment, such as plumbing, heat, and air conditioning. Do you have a specific time frame for those things to be repaired?
Heating and air conditioning is, we require that to be addressed more or less immediately, 24 hours. A lot of it depends on the severity of the concern. A
Okay.
leaking faucet, we're not going to ask a landlord to get that done in 24 hours. We like to see some recognition of the problem on the part of the landlord and a time frame for when they're going to get it done. Heating and air conditioning, that's a health and safety concern, though. We ask that be done more promptly.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
Shalini, let me just address that again. If you are seeing your property manager entering your apartment after you, without a good reason, and you feel that you're just being harassed, you need to file a complaint with the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. And I will get around to you eventually, I promise. All right, what else?
I
Matt,
think
there
Tom
was
is
a-
doing a good job of monitoring the chat room. I don't want
Yeah,
to
I
like
know,
interfere.
I'm trying,
Tom,
but
does code deal with ADA,
ADA?
Americans with Disabilities Act?
Yeah, I mean, if the physical again, the physical condition of the building, some of these buildings, as you know, Matt, are 50 years old. ADA requirements change. A ramp in an older section, an older building in Montgomery County may not have the 1 in 12 slope that is a requirement today.
I think this question from Eaton is that the management company has, he alleges, has blocked the access that were for disabled entrance or access, created a barrier. I imagine, obviously first I'd go to the landlord and say, hey, you can't block the ramp, you can't make the door impossible to open, etc. If they don't do that, is that a code complaint or a landlord tenant?
You can go code first, 311.
311.
We'll look at it first. That's sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chats here. I wanted to get back to Ms. Lott. You asked about an October 21 inspection and an inspector not allowing an opt-out option. The inspector was incorrect. He should have granted your request, Ms. Lott. If that happens again in the future, call 311 and ask to speak to that inspector's supervisor.
Good to know. What else do we have? By the way, the thing about the heating and air conditioning, heating has been around for a long time, and the county requires, I believe, maybe it's state, I'm not sure, Tom, but it's 68 degrees minimum. The apartment has to be able to maintain heat of at least 68 degrees. And the air conditioning is at 80 degrees. We asked for 70 something when we tried to push the legislation, but 80 degrees is what they decided on. And the air conditioning has to be a good working order. And I imagine that in both situations, there's a difference between it being 65 degrees and not 68 versus it being 45 degrees, that it becomes a life safety issue. And the same
Absolutely.
thing with air conditioning, that in the summer months when we're seeing the 90s and 100-degree temperatures and people in their homes and the temperatures start to rise, well above 80 degrees into 90 degrees in these apartments, we've seen people die because of those kinds of temperatures. It is also a life safety issue. What else, Malek? You guys paying attention here?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
see, this is an interesting question from someone about what are the boundaries for code inspectors? For example, do inspectors have the right to instruct tenants to rearrange or discard furniture because they think space is limited in a certain area? I guess that's a safety issue.
Or cluttering?
Yeah, an egress concern. I don't see that question.
Tompkins?
It's the last one.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Again, furniture and belongings, they cannot ask you to discard the furniture, no. They could ask you to relocate it, certainly. We need a clear path of egress and ingress throughout your unit. You have to be able to get to your balcony, to your windows in the event of an emergency. To discard furniture, no.
I will say, though, that in the case of cluttering or hoarding, that the apartment community, the manager or the landlord, could determine that a certain amount of clutter in an apartment is outside the rules or a fire hazard, or unhealthy in a hoarding situation where mice and vermin and rats could be attracted by it. And obviously, if your refrigerator is filled with rotting food or whatever, that all of those conditions could be subject to to a code violation possibly, and also to the landlord deciding that you are not abiding by the rules of health and safety in the community and possibly doing damage to his or her property. So just keep that in mind. But back to Mr. Howley's statement, they can't come in and say, get rid of that chair just because they don't like it. Bad upholstery.
And we could, I'm sorry, if we could just be really clear about the issue, which comes up a lot about smoking in a non-smoking building. Is that a landlord tenant issue?
I believe it is. Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong. It
Okay.
typically, there are non-smoking buildings out there. I know that it's very difficult to enforce. I've heard that. But we don't, code enforcement doesn't address smoking. That
Okay.
would have to be landlord tenant.
It's put it this way, it's not enforced very much. It is not something that landlord tenant can enforce easily. It is something that the property management or landlord could enforce, but they frequently do not. And so what it requires is obviously the identification of who's responsible for it. And then the landlord has to have the will to say, hey, look, either stop smoking or eventually once, twice, thrice through a process of informing that tenant verbally and in writing again and again that you are outside the
Fine.
rules of the building and establishing a breach of lease case where the tenant has violated the community rules to such a degree that they should be evicted. We're loath to see that, but there is a process for doing that, and it requires the manager of the property or the landlord to act accordingly. We know many cases when tenants have identified who is smoking, they're not supposed to be smoking, it's a smoke-free building, they're senior citizens, people with asthma, people with lung conditions, and they don't want incense, marijuana, or cigarettes in their lungs because they can't live there. And it's a growing problem, so to speak, with marijuana. that we are seeing more and more around the county. But one has to check to see whether in fact your building is a smoke-free building. So somebody saying so is one thing. There being a clause in your lease that says this is a smoke-free building is a more serious matter. So check with that. If your landlord, if you've identified, sorry, I got a fire trucks going by my apartment, really not stopping here, fortunately. If you've identified the problem, if the property management has been properly alerted and you've alerted them in writing and they refuse to take any action and it is a severe problem for you, you should file a complaint with the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. And that's sirens just backing up my comment.
Matt,
Okay.
may I answer
Please.
Phyllis Gilbert? Phyllis, management's poor response to your front door, please call 311. You know, none of us is getting any younger. I've seen elderly folks struggling with doors and it drives me crazy. Please call 311, Phyllis Gilbert, about that. With regard to BOW, does the same apply to smoke density after a fire? I'm afraid I don't understand that. Smoke density.
I think air quality, who's responsible? Does code have anything to do with air quality? Say there was a fire in a building, but you can still smell the smoke in the building in some way, or who measures that? How would you even approach that?
I mean, it happens, certainly. Big blowers, we've all seen them or brought in. It would have to be a case-by-case situation. We could ask the property manager to look, can you air this out a little bit better now? We do not measure air quality to this point.
But I imagine if it's a legitimate concern, for example, if there were a fire, I know there was one, for example, up in Burtonsville at a senior building, or the stairwell caught fire. Stairwell was made of wood. I don't know how that happened, but the fire escape stairwell was made of wood and there was a fire in there. Now, the property management, I will say, came in with real industrial cleaners.
Yeah.
And they scrubbed the walls, they scrubbed the rugs, they aerated out the place and did all of that stuff. But I imagine if they didn't do that, the rugs would still have the smoke material in the rugs. And that when you walk on it, it could puff up and become smoky there. So there's any number of ways where remediation might not be sufficient. But it's going to be tough to gauge from the hip here. But if you think that the place still feels smoky, still smells smoky, still interferes with your breathing, I think that would it be fair, Tom, for them to contact you to take a look?
Yeah, after bringing your concerns again to management first. Yeah, absolutely.
Question from MH, Monica. Pat, what do we got there?
I thought Tom
Here we-
was pretty good answering the question.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling down now.
Yeah, I see.
In the event of a leak from an AC unit from units above, carpet got soaked, dry carpet, there was a moldy smell, but management was refusing to change the carpet. Are they obligated to change it and give credit for the time we were unable to be in the apartment?
Well, if you were out of your apartment, that was a significant problem. I would contact 311 and let us come out and take a look. 2 weeks.
Well, let me say a couple things just in case we don't raise expectations. First of all, did the property manager ask you to leave and put you up in a motel for 2 weeks? That's a different scenario than you deciding unilaterally that you don't like the apartments because of the damage to the rug and that you've moved out on your own. That will be a question that gets asked. The other question, is whether or not code or some other official came into the apartment to assess that it was uninhabitable during that time. If you had a record that it was uninhabitable, you've got a better case. I've always believed that if you're paying for something and not getting it, you're entitled to some kind of compensation. But as with all of these things, there's a process. And so if you unilaterally decide that I'm owed this, and for example, and you don't pay the rent without getting approval not to pay the rent, you're going to get in trouble. So, we'd have to take a look and see whether or not there's a legitimate claim that can be proven in order to get compensation. We have gotten compensation for tenants in the past who, for example, there was work being done on their balconies and the balconies were not usable. And landlord tenant working with the tenants and with us determined by square footage that if the balcony is not usable, they negotiated a rebate on rent for a certain amount for everyone whose balconies were not usable. After all, I pay rent that includes the use of the space that I'm paying for. So that was one situation. On the other hand, if you've decided that you saw a mouse and so you moved into a hotel, the landlord may not be responsible for that hotel if you decided that on your own. On the other hand, if you had a real vermin infestation and the landlord refused to hire an exterminator, and landlord tenant or code came in and said, you've got a vermin infestation, and this is a problem, and you have children, and you were authorized to move into a hotel, then I expect that your landlord would have to compensate you for the time that you were not able to live in your home. So every one of these cases obviously has to be looked at. So, but it's not as easy as all that.
And Tom, can you address for people who are residents of the municipalities, Rockville, Gaithersburg, Tacoma Park, do they have their own code enforcement? Mute.
You're on mute, Tom.
Pardon me.
Hi.
Montgomery County has a contract with Tacoma Park to provide rental inspection services. Tacoma Park has their own code enforcement group, however. Rockville, Gaithersburg, and some other smaller jurisdictions, Barnesville, Matt, have their own, are their own jurisdictions and have their own personnel to respond to code violations and concerns.
That's the city of Rockville, the municipal jurisdiction of the city of Rockville and the city of Gaithersburg. So it's not necessarily the region, it's the municipal, the city that has its own housing department and own code inspection regime. And unfortunately, likewise, not all the laws of Montgomery County apply to these jurisdictions. Bill 1915, the Rental Protection Act that we passed, does not apply in Gaithersburg or Rockville City, even though many of the laws of Montgomery County do, not all of them do. Okay, we have time for one more question. Is there one? Should we make one up?
The just cause bill, is there a number?
Yes, there is. Let me find it for you. I think it's HB 0880. But if you're on this call, we will be sending out the information of that bill to everybody. And there is a Senate companion bill that is being co-sponsored by Senator Muse of Prince George's County. And as again, it's Delegate Janelle Wilkins, who's on our board, who is the lead sponsor in the House of Delegates. And it will be Friday, February 24th, when the hearing for that bill happens. If you'd like to testify, contact us at info@rentersalliance.org, especially if you've been threatened with tenant holding over without any justification. We'd like to hear about it, or of somebody who's faced that. We expect, in addition to renters, there will be many community leaders and elected officials who will also be testifying. Is there anything else, Pat or Malek? Tom, any last words?
Good night, everybody.
Well, as we say, if you have any of these issues, you can contact us at info@rentersalliance.org. We would be pleased to counsel you. If you're not sure whether to file, again, to repeat, if you have an issue in your apartment community, contact your property manager or your landlord first. Give them an opportunity to fix it. If they're not responsive, then you can contact 311. When you contact 311 and you're asking for the code enforcement department or the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, get a case number. So when they get you through, so that you can track the status of your case and when they get back to you. If you have any issue about responsiveness with your landlord or the county, the Renters Alliance is here to help, and so is our colleagues over at the Housing Initiative Partnership. I want to thank Carmen Castro Conroy for her expertise and support in the Maryland Tax Credit Program. And I want to thank Tom Howley from the Code Enforcement Department, taking time out from family and friends to join us this evening. And of course, our staff, Malek Demir and Pat Beckham, and David Mullins was attending the county council hearing going on simultaneously up in Germantown to make sure that renters also have an organized voice in public affairs and being represented there. So with that, everybody, thank you very much. This has been recorded. It will be available on YouTube and will be in our next newsletter. So thank you and good night, everyone.